And so, here we are. After sorrow and much toil, and so many false starts I've lost track, we finally have a live-action Justice League film. And it bombed. By which I mean it's still made over $500 million, but that's $200 million less than Superman or Wonder Woman made on their own, $400 million less than Batman's made on his own in over a decade, and barely break-even territory for a movie with this kind of budget. Especially once you factor in the marketing costs, which nobody does, because that would honestly just be too depressing. As usual for DC Extended Universe movies, half the internet decided to hate it the moment they heard about it, over a year in advance. Don't say you didn't, you did. The rest of us decided to hate it the weekend it premiered. And don't kid yourselves, true believers. We self-proclaimed fans of this universe hate this movie more than you ever will. More than you ever could. To you, it's just another bad movie. To us, it's a long string of broken promises. And our hatred's almost entirely due to the fact that a family tragedy compelled director Zack Snyder to leave this picture halfway through post-production. Warner Brothers, being the imagination-deprived pack of fools that they are, immediately turned around and hired the only other superhero movie director they could think of, the Avengers' own, Joss Whedon. Just in time for him to incorporate all of that test audience and market research data that the WB loves so much more than it loves the creative visions of actual directors. Who cares if Age of Ultron alienated half of Whedon's fan base? Who cares if Whedon's become a walking burnout case after decades of fighting TV executives for a decent time slot? And half a decade sitting through tedious meetings with the Disney Marvel brass, shooting down all of their hideously bad ideas in the nicest possible way, because of course the people coming up with all the bad ideas could summarily fire your ass on a whim. And they will. Hashtag rehire James Gunn. Hashtag they're not going to actually rehire James Gunn, and that's sad. Even if anyone at the WB knew all of this, I doubt they would have cared. He made the competition $2 billion in just under 3 years. Besides, they'd already hired him to do rewrites without telling anyone. To bring in that jokey tone you people claim to like so much, and lighten the dour slog of yet another Zack Snyder film. Which this still clearly is. Oh, cut the shit. I've seen every single one of Whedon's theatrical films, and hundreds, if not thousands of hours of his TV shows. I know the Joss Whedon films, when I see them. And... okay, credit where it's due. The opening credit sequence, which amounts to a music video for a low-key cover of the Leonard Cohen song Everybody Knows, sung by a Norwegian singer-songwriter I'd never heard of before named Sigrid, is pure Zack Snyder. He still gets the directed by credit all to himself, but that's because there are union rules about that shit. If I'm reading dga.org correctly, as long as your butt was in the big chair for 90% of principal photography, then you still get all the credit, and thus all the blame. Regardless of how much the editors changed the color scheme of what you shot, making the trailers even more hilariously unrepresentative of the final product than usual. Seriously, watching these trailers now gives me Fant Four-Stick flashbacks, which you should never do. Ever. Or how much your replacement reshot in a mad dash to make that sweet post-Thanksgiving pre-Christmas release window. Hell, that used to be the only blockbuster season before Jaws made summer blockbusters a thing. Besides, Whedon did enough to get himself screenplay credit. Under Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice writer Chris Terrio. And the word "and." Believe it or not, this is an important smoking gun, because there are union rules about that shit too. If I'm reading WGA.org correctly, Whedon contributed at least 33% of the finished script, and did not work together with Terrio. Terrio? Whatever. When you work as a team, you get an ampersand between your names. As in, story by Chris Terrio and Zack Snyder. When you parachute in at the last minute to fuck up somebody else's hard work, you get an and between your names. As in, screenplay by Chris Terrio and Joss Whedon. Whedon and Snyder's directorial styles are very obviously different, and they just as obviously clash. Combined with all of the other inevitable interference from on high, and it's no wonder this movie is an uneven mess, full of ill-timed jokes, unnecessary retcons, and the most generic plot under a yellow sun. Oh gee, a team of loner superheroes has to set aside their differences and work together to stop an alien invasion. Led by a one-note villain, who's really not much more than a precursor for the actually interesting villain that some damn fool, or pack of them, decided to save for the sequel. Never seen that before, except in this other big dumb superhero crossover movie, directed and written by Joss Whedon. But one can't blame Whedon for everything. Well, a lot of people can, but you shouldn't. Those who run the WB's film division have long demonstrated they have nothing but contempt for their nominal co-workers in publishing, especially comic book publishing. Both are vying for the attention of a CEO and board of directors that treats them like an intellectual property mine and tries to run them the way John D. Rockefeller ran coal out of Colorado. Watching this movie's like picking through the remains of a tent city that got massacred by the National Guard, is what I'm saying. Everywhere I look, I see the wreckage of what could have been, and probably almost was, sticking out of the blasted ground. And yes, I just compared this movie to the Ludlow Massacre. What? We start off with Batman, because if it's not Batman, it's not Batman enough. After all, he's the star of a series of video games that make much more money than these movies ever could, to the WB Film Division's eternal shame. When we last saw The Dark Knight, he was trying to intimidate Amanda Waller in his civvies, which... bad call there, Bruce. Should have worn your power suit. Here we see him hunting a parademon across the rooftops of Gotham. Parademons being the foot soldiers and shock troops of the planet Apocalypse. Reduced here, in live action, down to flying zombies that can smell fear. That'll be important later on for the dumbest of reasons. You might remember the parademons from the brief cameo they had in one of Batman's nightmares back in Dawn of Justice, where Batman was the leader of a brave band of freedom fighters in the, dare I say it, dare post-apocalyptic wasteland of Earth, fighting the tyrannical fascist government of Superman. I actually like that dream, because you could interpret it as both a vision of the future, or a massive projection exercise on Batman's part. Another character was supposed to have a similar vision in this film, but nope. And that would have fit in perfectly well, maybe tied this whole sorry sad sack trilogy together, but nope. Not here. On the plus side, we get to see a bit more of Gotham. And I do like Gotham's aesthetic. It's not some recognizable modern city standing in for Gotham, like Chicago was in Dark Knight, and bits of New York were in Dark Knight Rises. But that is the literal background. In the foreground, we have a bog-standard MacGuffin gathering expedition as our plot. Not as an excuse for the plot, the way the Kryptonian Registry of Citizens was in Man of Steel, or that chunk of kryptonite was in Batman v Superman. Our villain has to collect 3 boxes that, when combined, will allow him to terraform... apocoform? The Earth. And that just is the plot. The way a MacGuffin plot never should be. And it is now the 3rd mass extinction event that the heroes and anti-heroes of this universe have averted. Zod only wanted to cryptoform the Earth because he was a space fascist out to rebuild his homeworld, and he didn't especially care whose bones were in the foundations. Enchantress wanted to kill all the humans out of pure spite, as far as I can tell. And as for our villain here, Steppenwolf, honestly, what can you say? I can say I do get a kick out of how both major comic book universes are finally starting to go full Jack Kirby with these movies. For all the love of the Silver Age of comics, the 50s and the 60s, that all the writers and artists and producers claim to have, few have been willing to go full Jack Kirby, and it's consistently held their work back. They don't call Kirby the King just for the alliteration. Jack is the King Kirby because he's the man most directly responsible for hammering out the metaphysical shapes of both these universes. Mostly during the Bronze Age of comics, the 70s and early 80s, which those in charge of the big two comic book universes love way more than any preceding or succeeding ages. But they're still hesitant about admitting it for some stupid reason. That was when Gwen Stacy died that first time. When Roy Harper first got his bad habit. And it's when Jack Kirby created the twin warring planets of New Genesis and Apocalypse. On the one side, gods of life, liberty, justice, and the Source. On the other side, gods of anti-life, slavery, degradation, hideousness. Both locked in an eternal struggle for shit that's frankly too complicated to get into because this review's already long enough as it is. I shouldn't even have to get into it because this movie should have done it for me. Instead, all of it is deep, deep background. Apocalypse barely gets a mention. New Genesis doesn't even rate one. And out of all the Apocalyptans they could have chosen for their villain, they chose poorly in Steppenwolf. And they did him up poorly besides. This was his face in Dawn of Justice, and this is the face we wind up with? And for someone from Apocalypse, he's not very talkative. They're all pretty chatty there, as another Superman once said. And their Byzantine, rambling, evil monologues are one of the most endearing things about them. He does deliver one really short one to Wonder Woman's mom. And a little later, he'll mention that our heroes have the blood of the old gods in them, but then add, the old gods died. A direct quote of the first line in the first New Gods comic book. But that, along with one cry of, for Darkseid, that's all we get. And all these little references did was ignite a sliver of hope in me that the rest of the movie proceeded to snuff right out. So after Batman's prey self-destructs, leaving 3 perfectly square shapes in the wall behind it, because Darkseid is many things, including a master of brand synergy, Bats decides to finally make some use of all that data he stole from Lex Luthor and unite the 7. Yeah, remember that original marketing pitch for this thing? Even though there's only 6 of them? Even after Superman comes back to life? Yeah. Talk about that more in a bit, but for now, flawless marketing campaign, WB. Great fucking job there. Meanwhile, over in London, Roose motherfucking Bolton is trying to blow up the Old Bailey. The same courthouse the terrorist known as V blew up in the first 5 minutes of his movie. Good thing Diana's there to make his minions spout exposition. I like how one of the minions brags about how big their bomb is, but once Diana throws it through the roof, it doesn't even crack the windows. Of course, this scene was supposed to go on for a bit. Another bigger explosion was supposed to go off while Diana was giving Bolton the Elder the business. We know this because we have the footage, and because it would have been a perfect illustration of this movie's eventual tagline about how you can't save the world alone, even if you're Wonder Woman. It would establish the fact that no one hero, no matter how powerful, can literally save everyone all the time. necessitating the need for heroes to band together and form some kind of league. But we couldn't show Diana failing, of course. That would be depressing. And she's the new feel-good crowd-pleaser of this universe. Yeah, Steppenwolf, we know the old gods died because we watched Diana murk the last one at the end of her solo film. Meanwhile, somewhere up north, Batman's finally tracked down Aquaman. And for the first time since Peter David's run writing Aquaman comics back in the 90s, I actually liked Arthur right off. He cemented that by reacting to mention of Gotham City by going, "Oh, that shithole?" And I'm like, "So you've been." Later, he'll get to be the team's drunken cynic, meaning he's an Aquaman after my own heart. But here, at the start, he rejects Bruce Wayne's offer of an alliance because... shit, we gotta build tension somehow. Rejected, Bats gets back on his plane and shaves off the week's worth of beard he managed to grow in the time it took Diana to smack Bolton's boys down. Making me think his pitch to Aquaman was the real opening scene of this film, transposed here so it could come after 2 action scenes in the hope that no one would notice. Like, none of us know how beards work. Or something. Dumb as that is, I do have to shout out Alfred for being the real MVP for the second movie in a row. Honestly, he is the 7th member of this benighted team. Did he get his own character poster? No. But he should have. Plus, he's a Bruce Diana shipper, just like me, and everyone else who watched the Justice League cartoon that started in 2001. I'm only interested in her skill set, the Bat says, to which Alfred and I simultaneously reply, "Oh, I'm sure you are." You go, Al. Keep that boy in line. God knows he needs it. Meanwhile, in Central City, stuff is happening that'll make every fan of the Flash TV show drum their fingers on their armrests in impatience. I've had people in real life ask me why Ezra Miller and Dr. Manhattan are playing the Allens, father and son, rather than Guston Grant and 1990s Flash. Well, for one thing, the Flash TV show crew has to make a 22-hour movie every year, and gods know that's tough enough without your main star moonlighting for a feature. The second reason they didn't do this is a lot of people don't watch the Flash TV show, so all of this is relatively new to them. Especially if, unlike some of us, they don't read comics and don't know what it means to see Jeff Johns' name under the producer credit. From here, I could go on to my usual rant about the career of Jeff Johns. Chief Creative Officer of DC Entertainment, and the man most directly responsible for the modern characterizations of Flash, Green Lantern, Cyborg, and hell, the whole Justice League at this point. He's had a crack writing all of them. I could talk about how he leveraged his position as one of Richard Donner's assistants to get his first gig back in the early 2000s, and about how he rose through the ranks over 10 years of stunningly consistent mediocrity. How his mediocrity has infected other better writers in the DC staple as they have been ordered from on high to recreate his inexplicable Michael Bay-like success. But I won't go on that rant. Except to say that in this film, when Alfred tells Batman the tragically retconned history of the Allen family, and Batman goes, "Jesus, I almost stood up in the theater and shouted, 'I know, right?' That's what I said back in 2010, when a certain someone made that the focal point of modern Flash comics. The Flashpoint, you might say, if you wanted to be a dick about it. Besides, in spite of all my better instincts, I actually like this Flash. As in 2001's Justice League, a Flash is the enthusiastic one, fanboying out about all this comic book shit as much as I'm supposed to be. He doesn't even let Bats get his pitch out. It's just, stop right there, I'm in. I like that line, and this whole scene, despite the fact it was obviously made for the trailers. As was the subsequent one. What are your superpowers again? I'm rich. See? Check out my sweet-ass Benz. This glory shot of my sweet-ass Benz just paid for 10 whole seconds of a fight scene. Or a reshoot. Also, this movie cast Joe Morton, Cyborg's dad. Yeah, typecasting's a bitch. But I'd rather they hire a pro at playing, well, not mad scientists, but certainly idealistic ones whose actions only look mad if you step back for a bit. He even gets his own moment of badassitude later on, in the face of Steppenwolf, impressing the both of us. At last, one that doesn't whine. I could say the same about his Ray Fisher-played son. I was worried about Cyborg. For a guy who was only created in the 80s, he's been through a lot of variations, and there's always the temptation, especially in mass-market live action, to combine them all into some kind of Frankenstein. Someone even thought it was a good idea to lean into this comparison, and they were correct. Kindly Dr. Stone somehow snuck his son's body into Star Labs Metropolis and fused it with the box of alien technology they'd been poking at all this time, without anyone noticing. His son asks if Dr. Stone hasn't told anyone about all this because he doesn't want anyone to see the monster, and Dr. Stone insists, "You're not a monster, Victor." To which his son replies, "It's weird that you thought I meant me." And for the second time, I had to stop myself from saying something out loud in the theaters. And this time it was, ooh, there he is. There's the Victor Stone I know. How you doing, Vic? Long time no see since they stuck you in a kiddie cartoon. Not that I hate that cartoon, like some. But I like how in live action you can really play up the body horror aspects of Vic's transformation. I wish they'd done more. But then again, they probably did, and it got cut for cost-saving measures. So that's our team. And that's our film, basically. Every scene in this movie, there's something I like, and there's something that pisses me off. I love the flashback Diana narrates about the first apocalyptic invasion of Earth. For some reason, Steppenwolf left his 3 mother boxes behind after he got his ass kicked by a combined army of Amazons, Atlanteans, standard-issue humans, old gods, and a Green Lantern. Though definitely not the Green Lantern I'm sure our producer would like to see. Back in the present, Queen Hippolyta wonders why these boxes have suddenly woken up after all this time. And that's a very good question, Your Highness. Too bad we won't get an answer. The shitty answer is because Superman's dead, despite his being dead long enough for Suicide Squad to happen. And because Amazons, Atlanteans, each stands and falls alone. Well, they seem to have been doing that for the last few thousand years too, so why now, specifically? Who knows? Who cares? I like how the Amazons get something to do. I don't like how that something is get their asses kicked to prove how serious the threat really is. Same goes for the Atlanteans, especially Mira, and our team as a whole, minus Superman. At least you won't catch Hippolyta warming a throne with her ass while the universe burns, like some comic book fantasy monarchs I could name. She's out here, riding hard with the girls, playing MacGuffin keep away, and it's better than nothing. And where does Steppenwolf even go whenever he boom tubes away? This abandoned Russian town in the shadow of a nuclear power plant? Why isn't this town just Pripyat? If it were, every Call of Duty player in the audience the world over would have instantly started reciting the opening to COD 4 the moment they saw it. 50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town. I can't believe everyone involved missed out on such instant name recognition. Is it because Pripyat's in the Ukraine and certain international markets, Russia, might care if a multi-million-dollar American motion picture set its climactic battle there? Or is it because nobody's dumb enough to have moved back to Pripyat? Or is it because every other movie's used Chernobyl for something at this point? Gods know the last 2 Zack Snyder films drew a lot of bad faith comparisons to the Bayformers films, without sharing one of their settings. People should have saved all those up for this movie. And maybe thrown in a few Good Day to Die Hard comparisons as well. Back in Gotham, I do like to see old Picklepuss as James Gordon. I don't like that he barely gets anything to do beyond the standard James Gordon thing of giving Batman the plot. And he gets one good line about how nice it is to see Batman playing well with others again, which at least has the benefit of being true. Now that he's in a group setting, a live-action Batman gets to do what I consider to be one of the most Batman things a Batman can ever do, and school the noobs. They barely listen to him, but it's the thought that counts. Barry, as the truest noob, listens the most. After he gets a mild anxiety attack at the sight of a 7-foot-tall dude with a glowing axe and an army of mosquito-winged zombies, Batman tells him, save one person. Shit can get real weird real fast in the hero game, but fundamentally, it does all boil down to saving one person at a time. Uncoordinated and raw as they may be, I do like how our team naturally splits itself into sub-teams. As if the spirit of Gardner Fox still lives on within the Justice League. Barry and Vic are Team Accident, as Barry puts it, which I called Team Super Science because that sounds a hell of a lot better. Diana and Arthur naturally become Team Noble Scion, and Batman just as naturally forms the pivot point between the two. Coordinating, scheming, and occasionally motivating by being a complete asshole. I would expect nothing less from a Batman. I don't like how the issue that splits our team is Superman's resurrection. I knew it was coming. Dawn of Justice contains at least 2 different setups for it, and its execution still left me wanting. That's because the debate moves too damn fast, especially considering the gravity of the situation. Hell, even at normal speed, everything in this movie feels like it's on fast forward. It's the strangest fucking thing. Watching it, I sensed something. A presence I haven't felt since 2009, when I watched the theatrical cut of Zack Snyder's Watchmen. I panned that motherfucker when it came out, just like the rest of you, because I didn't know at the time, I don't think any of us knew at the time, that there was literally an hour and a half of that thing missing. And I'd bet folding money the same is true here. Not just B-roll footage or alternate takes that got cut for time. I'm talking like an actual hour of finished in-the-can film. Gone. So this movie can be 2 hours long, because 2 hours times however many theaters times however many showings per day equals profit. And once you have this profit number, you can plug that into next year's spreadsheet, and, well, there you go. Everyone can go home, get their Christmas bonus. Who cares if the film makes any fucking sense or not? You can tell the debate moves too fast because it moves right into the next scene, when it's just Bats and Alfred. And here Bats clinches things for the pro-resurrection side by declaring that Clark was/is more human than I am. Hell yes! It's about time we saw some self-awareness out of a Batman. He got a little bit of it at the end of Dawn of Justice, but that was too little too late for some. Might as well have him spell out how Superman lived in this world, fell in love, got a job. Plus, he had that one living parental unit that he actually called and flew out to visit on the regular. Too bad the film's so pressed for time. And now it's going to take time out to explain the mechanics of the do-it-yourself Lazarus pit our team builds out of the wreck of that Kryptonian ship that's still in the middle of downtown Metropolis even after it's spawned a doomsday. And we've got to have a fight scene that's the definition of pointless. And that's coming from me, the fan this scene is supposed to service. Yeah. Thing is, as a fan, I already know Clark could wipe the floor with all these amateurs. Even when he's in a post-resurrection haze that Lois has to snap him out of. Hey, big guy, sun's getting real low. Actually, no, the sun is finally rising, because of course, resurrection, sun god, Horus, Apollo, Jehovah, Kal-El, Clark, Joseph, Kent. So all this fight does is illustrate how uncoordinated and amateur hour the rest of the league really is. And we already had a fight scene that did that down in the tunnels. Still, great first day on the job, everyone. You destroy an old section of Gotham City, get your asses kicked by the guy you just brought back from the dead, and let your one advantage slip into the hands of the enemy in all the commotion. But hey, at least Superman's back, baby. Woo! Time to wrap all this up. My woo seems muted, because this resurrection shares the same problem as all the other Superman resurrections. The presence of an immediate threat to the planet destroys any chance this movie, or really any of the Superman resurrection stories, might have to actually explore the fact that its protagonist just came back from the fucking dead. I mean, that's really not something you can just gloss over. Of course, this movie doesn't have the imagination or the budget to do what the comics did and show Clark going on a grand adventure through the afterlife, with maybe a little help from the soul of Jonathan Kent. And they don't have the guts to do what, say, Game of Thrones did, and just have Clark admit that there was nothing on the other side. One minute you're getting impaled through the chest by a giant monster, the next minute you're surrounded by all these weirdos. Instead, this movie plays it off with a joke, and then it's back to business like almost nothing happened. No dying, and I get the exclusive. Yes, ma'am. And while that is Lois and Clark in a nutshell, it's too bad this is their only scene. It's even worse, Lois has nothing to do for the rest of this movie. In the last two, she not only unraveled the whole plot while the boys were still dick measuring, she figured a way to get everybody out of it. She should be the 8th member of this team, complete with her own password to the Batcave Wi-Fi, and her own seat at the big conference table, with her own logo painted on the back of it. Speaking of things that would have been nice, the final fight is a foregone conclusion, and it was always going to be. In an attempt to make Superman's resurrection the feel-good, crowd-pleasing moment of the third act, all this movie actually did was make the rest of the team seem comparatively useless. Good for clearing out mooks, not so much for the final boss. That's Clark's job, and it's been Clark's job for a while now. There's a reason he didn't join the Justice League after his mid-80s reboot. There's also a reason why the villains of the first season of that Justice League cartoon I keep referencing, because it's the last unequivocally good Justice League thing I've seen, Young Justice aside, almost invariably made sure to punch him into the next county first thing. And it's why subsequent seasons focused on conflicts that couldn't be so easily punched. Unless, of course, they came from Apocalypse. There, as here, there was usually a bad guy to punch, a MacGuffin to pull apart, and a plot contrivance to save our heroes from having to actually kill the bad guy and bring up any nasty moral complications right near the end of things. We all know how that goes. Here, Steppenwolf's minions can smell fear, so they all turn on him the moment he starts to fear failing. They all swarm him and then teleport away, leaving our heroes to survey a landscape that suddenly blooms, as all the biomechanical shit Steppenwolf's boxes called out of the ground suddenly turns into plant life. And somewhere, Swamp Thing is pausing in whatever he's doing and going, "What the fuck?" Then, sending his consciousness through the green, he spies our heroes having their big damn hero moment and goes, "Oh, them." And then he goes back to, I don't know, saving a film crew from being possessed by the ghosts of the Louisiana plantation where they're filming their period drama or something. After that, it's all epilogue. There's a bit where the Kent farm got foreclosed on between movies without Clark around to send money back to his mom. But Bruce Wayne steps in, buys whatever Smallville bank held the mortgage, and I didn't mention any of this before because it barely even counts as a subplot. Diana Batts and Alfred start making plans to turn Wayne Manor into a Hall of Justice. Vic, Arthur, and Barry go off to set up their own solo movies, and somewhere in Monaco? Ibiza? It's pronounced Ibiza. Lex Luthor and Deathstroke are planting the seeds of a sequel we may or may not ever see. Oh, and I lied beforehand. Lois gets one last thing to do. Write the closing monologue. Like the rest of this film, it tries to be an uplifting ray of comic book light meant to dispel the ambient, unrelenting darkness. And like the rest of this film, it comes off bland and generic. Less the triumphant capstone to the first act of an extended universe, and more like a contractual obligation. The cutthroat island of superhero movies. I wish I could hate this movie, but there's too much in it to love. I wish I could love this movie, but so much of it is so obviously compromised and rendered down into a thoroughly tasteless mush that I hate it. And I got agents of the Matrix whispering in my ear, telling me all of this was inevitable. Which, fair's fair, it kind of was. Unless you've made a film studio $1 billion in the last 10 years, between a sixth to a third of your film is going to go missing before it even gets close to a public theater screen, only to be sold back to you as overpriced DVDs and Blu-rays, and now digital versions, mislabeled as the extended or ultimate or director's or unrated cut of whatever, when they should all rightly be called the cut you should have seen 6 months ago. We fans of the DCEU, gods help us, have grown so used to this that we expected it to happen here. And the fact that it hasn't is, hands down, the most disappointing thing of 2018. I can only hope the resulting debacle has taught a whole new segment of comic book fandom that our corporate overlords are not to be trusted. At all. About anything. Ever. Well, okay, you can trust them to want our money, but it's the same way that feudal lords wanted grain from their peasants and warm bodies to fight in their wars. Internet proxy wars though they might be, they are continuous and ongoing and as pointless as pretty much any other forgotten medieval border skirmish. The saddest thing is, because our corporate overlords are so insulated from the rest of us by all their money, power, and money, they have no idea when they're making bad decisions, and they will never face a single meaningful consequence for them. Ever. While we flame each other across Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, pointlessly arguing over which $200 million toy commercial is the best, or the worst, they collect their Christmas bonuses and laugh at us all the way to the bank that's foreclosing on your house. They still need us, though, to justify their expense accounts and private jets and the new wings they're building on their mansions and their private islands. So they keep financing these films and hiring what they consider to be successful artists to make them. Problem being, their definition of success is entirely financially driven, and unless you've made them $1 billion in the last 10 years... And that's how the whole sorry system works. Happy holidays, everyone. And a happy new year. Yes. Thanks for watching, everyone. Special thanks to our glorious patrons, Mr. Hootie Dean, Detective Steve, The Aftermovie Diner, and Stoogie. If you like this video, then consider becoming one of our glorious patrons by supporting the show on Patreon. Or you could just hit the like button, and the subscribe button, and the share button, so my droning voice can annoy all of your friends. But seriously, thanks for your support, everyone. It's been a great year, and maybe this year will be better than the last. Next time, I don't know, but I think something that actually gives me hope for the future might be nice. Don't you? Yeah.